Hello everyone, bonjour à tous. Dr. Husserl. There are a lot of Husserl at your clan and tribe who moved out from Israel, from Akkad, Arab, Sumer, and Babylon, and me, as always, beside Egypt, Roman, and Greek. There are a lot of Husserl and a lot of Safari, Safin, Safarova in the Balkan. But you devoted your life for phenomenology, while others at your time thinking to back their motherland, I mean after First World War. I did for prosteriori. I am in serenity as I talk to you and to Muslim barbar Algeria like a Camus and Derrida, while here follow war, as Thomas Hobbes explained this nature. For what? The man was born for citizenship. Le human inne pour citoyenneté. Philosophy is a practice for lawmakers in justice, and jury's authority are to ask any clan and organization to follow rule of law for goodwill of social contract in utilitarianism way by their jurisdiction. La philosophie est une pratique pour la législature dans le domaine de la justice. Les autorités du jury doivent demander à tout clan et organisation de suivre l'état de droit pour la bonne volonté du contact social de manière utilitarienne dans leur jurisdiction. Thus, scenic, each province is important, as all provinces to be good as a one union country. Henceforth, we are born for citizenship, for good and unity through logical argument, not segregation. Otherwise, our will be lower than Safari nature, a strong country in perpetuate peace. By science and health and philosophy means good thinking for morality and good wealth for all by rule of canon via independent judiciary system. Substance and attribute in prosteriori, part 7, logicism. Section 1. Empedocles expounded that compound substance is not real, like a birth and death, or coming to be and perishing. They are attributed to experiment, whereas prosteriori has a deduction in transcendental meaning, as all description can be defined in concept of language, while prosteriori looking for modern epistemology of advanced ontology in computerized language, and prosteriori in philosophy of geometry like a running as a mother all sport for prevention injury has a magnetic nature that all attribute has related to the senses to make indicator semantic electromagnet as a wave to form this by compound objects like corpse, cemetery, casket, or coffin, as a birth has a correlative dimension with embryo, sex, hospital, infant, and mother, while, as I expounded in Gardening to Guardian, some vocabulary has a resonate wave activity shadow in brain, which is in transcendental objects like a freedom or social justice, which needs space and time by experiment as a very different in primary school to think on this compound substance, but posteriori in deepest metaphysics of language still think to object like a pupil at the momentum conceive on a not right of cycling without permissible parents as a definition of social justice in his age. Thus, for posteriori, unlike empedocles, compound substance has an objective reality, like a blue violet or red violet is a combination from red and blue by different proportion, or orange from combining of red and yellow. Henceforth, we are on a spectrum gauge of measurement, even in metaphysics of causality of social justice or freedom related to economical distribution. Marx. Thus, a speculative hermeneutic of Hegel in logicism of prosteriori is a conjecture dividing space by axes of xyz in polynomial quadrant diagram. For modern logicism, in posteriori in different anatomical part of brain like a cortex and cerebellum, while posteriori objective magnet transferred to motor cortex as a new modern signal to describe logic Derrida in reconstructive signify or logical Wittgenstein in language, as all those logic still are object, while posteriori contend on a real scientific essence of number in a magnetic and concept in language as a discipline in formulation wave in prefrontal cortex and supplementary motor cortex. Why, like it, I think to painting as a preliminary stage, prior language of empedocles on a formation, first lesson of attribution to create resemblant object by line and color. Although Parmenides conceived change as a mere name, but in posteriori as a modern logic has a side rotation essence in polynomial quadrant of molecules and atomic rotation in sequence, while genetic always underpinning of brain activity and DNA content variation DCV brain has a regional variation with increased prevalence in front cortex and less variation in cerebellum. Democritus by atoms and void, when cited, sensible properties that are construction of human experience, the, the reality which cause them lie beyond the senses. End of the quote. His logicism more scientific than Aristotle. Aristotle, who was fundamental logic for Russell, Wittgenstein, and Derrida in language. Logic in Aristotle's mind is based on a categorical syllogism, one by correct reasoning in concept as a substance versus contrary validity is property of format in syllogism argument, while truth is a property of any individual concept as a premises and conclusion. For valid argument in mathematical or language concept, we need a correlative necessary inference from conclusion to premises. Indeed, method of logic is not science but a tool for science. In other words, a gauge for measurement of deduction by subjective predicate and their premises as inductive. Thus, for validity of an argument, conclusion is necessary to be inferred from premises, while sound is related to true and false of entities in argument. Thus, validity is property of format in argument, while sound is true and false as a property of each entity as a premises and conclusion in argument. For Aristotle, this entity as a predicate can be universal as a whole or particular one in affirmative or negative. Thus, for prosteriori in 21st century, logic of Aristotle is yet an objective one at which access and analyze the degree of predicate in quantity or quality of mathematics and concept of language in necessity, possibility, contingency, contrary as an assertoric riddle in representation of deductive object, while for posteriori induction as a more general is current electrical sensory in spinal cord by passing through inside the brain, entering to new universal of magnetic wave of deduction as a less general. In other words, innate logos for logicism Aristotle is an objective relation predicate to subject in concept, language, and mathematics, while posteriori has a modern logicism by research in physiology of neuron as a scientific epistemology in pure rational and beyond of the logical empiricism in Aristotle, and modern physiology of logic in principal mathematics of Russell and Whitehead, or Tractatus Logic philosophy of Wittgenstein. Prosteriori is in a magnetic wave of quantum of atomic molecule of lipid chain in front lobe of transcendental common sensory to reach modern scientific of intrinsic logos as a new ontology of logic in initial 21st century. Hereby, all tools of scientific to describe logic for Aristotle, like affirmation, negative, or self-contradictory and paradox proposition as a predicate by symbolic mathematics like algebra for Russell in front axiom, or logic of language in Wittgenstein to describe some senses as a some empiricism is not able to justify by language through description, or to be in swamp thinking in logic of Derrida as a presence metaphysics expressed by binary opposition and hierarchy, while for logic we need a mediation. All are surrounded by objective language as he is deconstructive signify even Kant by his cognitive intuition or logical investigation of Husserl. All and all are on terrestrial universe, while existential posteriori has a new tools like energy, electromagnet, hyperbolic, quantum, thermodynamic rotation, polynomial quadrant, calibrate and gauge, and so on, to expound logicism of posteriori in polynomial quadrant space and time inside the atomic of molecules in transcendental logic of modern scientific ontology of thought, which is not possible to explain by Euclidean geometry. Bertrand Russell and Whitehead in Principal Mathematics and Edmund Husserl did not refer each other on a logicism, but my biography and thought are more approaching to the logical investigation of Husserl. Principal mathematics, yet totally objective, modernizing logic with a mathematical symbolism in proposition and predicate as a prime function. While both Husserl and Russell have a degree in mathematics at the school, but phenomenology has a more universal and contemporary epistemology to ontology of prosteriori. But we do not deny that context Russell is virtue when has a connection between all kinds of numbers such as ordinal, cardinal, whole, and integers number with the property of proposition we cited. All Greek is mortal, thus Socrates is mortal, is like a square root of 2 is smaller than 2, or P and Q, or P or Q as a conjunctive or disconjunctive tries to follow rule of logicism, or when absolute value of number compares with the fixed totality of value, when refers to hierarchy of proposition. Remember us how Derrida being influenced by him. Thus, his law of mathematics in categorical of puzzle in paradox and contradiction in his vicious spherical principle VCP would be sort of plausible and permissible assertion to reduce mathematics to logic as a mathematic should be translated into logic. When conceived that number are in classes and classes in proposition, thereby idea of propositional function like a subject plus verb plus object makes a property of concept, and numbers in series classes has a asymmetrical transitive connection as a plausible reason. An analogous operation between parents to children like an arithmetic relation, while induction helps us to know a square root any number smaller than 2, and symbolic right or and symbolic right arm elbow means bigger than left one, or analogy of addition and dividing are like associatively and distributivity. As a Dr. Andrew Irving, the reading of the principal mathematics very difficult, very complex, as a too much attribution of the all symbolic of the mathematical algebra inside of the propositional predicate by Russell. And this is why students, even in a graduate or postgraduate, we need some people who devoted their life for so many years on a logic. And Dr. Andrew Irving's book is not bad for his research. Dr. Andrew Irving said the role of mathematician like a Mr. Whitehead to help Russell at his book not to be neglected. Russell focused on a certainty of mass knowledge and epistemology logical axiom, while there are empirical obscure premises. When Russell cited, we tend to believe the premises because we can see that their consequences are true, instead of believing the consequences because we know the premises to be true, but inferring of premises from consequences is the essence of induction. Thus, the method in investigation, the principle of mathematics, is really an inductive method and is substantially the same as the method of discovering general law in any other science. Or in other part of the principle of mathematics, he cited, in induction, if P is our logical premise and Q our empirical premise, we know that the P implies Q, and in textbook we are apt to begin with P and deduce Q. But P is only believed on account of Q if we can prove that not P implies not Q, thus P is the only hypothesis consistent with the facts that settles off the question. We try other hypotheses, but all fails. So probably this is simply betting on your inventiveness. It is interesting that, end of the quote. It is interesting that implicitly remember us to Cartesianism, while whole context of Husserl in logical investigation is based on Descartes and Kant, while in part of the principle, Russell has a dubious notion on axiom and all logic to revitalize the scientific method when cited. But in fact, self-evidence is never more than a part of the reason for accepting an axiom and is never indispensable. The reason for accepting an axiom as for accepting any other proposition is always largely inductive, namely that many propositions which are nearly indubitable can be deduced from it, and that no equally plausible way is known which this proposition could be true if the axiom were false, and nothing which is probably false can be deduced from it. In formal logic, the element of doubt is less than in most sciences, but it is not absent as it appears from the fact that the paradox followed from premises which were not previously known to require limitation. End of the quote. In Gardening to Guardian, I explicated that 2 times parenthesis a plus b is equal to a plus 2b, but 2 times parenthesis a times b is equal to ab, and it is not 2a times 2b. If inquisitive fellow student ask me which one has a more hierarchy function, addition or multiplication, my answer is times and multiplication more than addition, since first follow within group in parentheses as itself unity, then affiliated to outer function. Or in context of transcendental reason in 2016 on relativity theory in value, I refer that 1 plus 1 is equal to for our species as in compound eyes in insect, one object is many entities as one has a human has one lens. Thus, authority, biology, challenge in front of the old logic as a physics in 21st century, or power of biochemistry and mathematical tools into it. While Russell in other part of principle goes on, when pure mathematics is organized as a deductive system, it becomes obvious that if we are to believe in the truth of the set of premises, and are believed chiefly because of their consequences, this will be found to be always the case when a science is arranged as a deductive system. With the empirical science, this is evident. Electrodynamics, for example, can be concentrated into Maxwell equation, but these equations are believed because of the observed truths of certain of their logical consequences. The epistemological question, why should I believe this set of propositions? In logical order, the propositions of logic and pure mathematics are in part only inductive and provable from the premises of logic by pure deduction. In analytical, end of the quote. In analytical philosophy of logic, Russell cited, philosophy arises from an unusually obstinate attempt to arrive at the real knowledge, but passes from knowledge in ordinary life suffers from 3 defects. It is cocksure, vague, and self-contradictory. Why Russell is said cocksure? Why not use the conceit or vanity or vain? Maybe he knows the culture of the English people and his culture. And I know the culture of the Iranian people, how much is cocky. They cannot be homogenized for their right, for freedom, for secularism, but they have a hegemony during the history by religion, and this is their destiny. I'm very unfortunate, and no people can help them, just themselves. End of the quote by Russell. In logical atomism, perceives that the world consists of a plurality of independently existing particulars and standing in relation with all complex facts being constructed logically, while imposteriori refers to Democritus and Dalton bonds as a chemical reaction with their space and time in orbital of SPD and others. Thus, être or to be is not Platonio-Heideggerian of being in the metaphysic, but identity and its existence as a nothing beyond of atoms. And in posteriori logic is based on a methodology of discipline in reality of geometry in atoms and consequently in quantum molecules as a biochemistry facts in DNA and RNA of dendrites of lipid chain of brain to differentiation of production electromagnetic wave as looking for certainty based on a hypothesis of fact materialism for phenomenology of existence. Posteriori is part of phenomenology but has a common sense with Russell and Leibniz when Russell quoted, "We should be able to reason in metaphysics and morals in much the same way as in geometry and analysis. If controversy were to arise, there would be no more need of disputation between two philosophers than between two accountants." End of the quote. This sentence of Leibniz is very interesting. Henceforth, posteriori seeking phenomenology in substance and power of physiology of human neurons to make a magnetic wave for attribution as a fundamental concept in language and mathematical arithmetic or algebra are all based on a motor power of physiology in neuron to cause as such magnetic wave attribution. While Dr. Andrew Irving concluded in his book that Russell logicism in some respects quite primitive, clumsy, complicated, and confusing explanation mathematical method in propositional predicate function, axiom, and atomism. While my extension goes on method of tractates logico philosophicus of Wittgenstein and formal logic of Derrida, as they think that language has its own essence as a subjective, while posteriori perceive that phenomenology of geometry in quantum of neuron is a scientific epistemology by its subjective ontology taught as a subjective substance, while the rest remained in objective sense as an attribute, and language of computer science is a main tool to track real physiology of neurons in animals such as human to make artificial intelligence quotient IQ, while biological essence cannot be transcribed as its maneuver function in thought has a motor energy of thermodynamic in cell biochemistry, and its calculation has a source of evolution in DNA differentiation of neuron to form infinite magnetic waves to transmit as such waves as a concept language or attribute in mathematics for scientific physics and chemistry in object between human sapiens and formulation. This wave of a front lobe would be end of real essence of subjective philosophy. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.